About trying to utilize the space in the roof for a loft area. We're going to do a couple different things just to see how different wall widths affect it, what different ceiling heights affect it, or how they affect it, and what different options you can come up with. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in some generic walls. I'm not real concerned with the actual width of the walls and things. I'm just going to pick a generic 5. Whenever I do this, I'm going to draw a tiny house that is, I'm going to start out with the bare minimum here, or 8 foot wide, and I'm going to throw on some dimensions with my annotate tab. Click the align dimensions, and I'm going to choose the wall faces, and I'm actually going to size this. So right now it's 8 foot 5 by 36 feet 11. I want it to be 8 feet, so I can click on this wall, click on the dimension, and type in 8. I'm just going to go ahead and make this 30. So I have an 8 by 30 tiny house. Alright, so the next thing I wanted to cover is how we actually establish the wall heights. So we just did this little workup where we can see basically how we determine how high the wall heights are. So if we were using standard residential construction, basically we build a wall on top of our subfloor. So this is platform framing. So the wall is made up of the bottom plate, which is called a sole plate. That's an 1.5 inches thick. A pre-cut stud, which is 92 5/8 inch thick, and then a double top plate, which is 3 inches thick. This totals 8 feet 1 1/8 inch. The next thing is, if we had a 2x6 for our ceiling plate, we could have, it would be 5.5 inches thick, and then we have 3/4 inch thick plywood. So that's going to total 6.25 inches. If we add those all together, we end up with somewhere around 8 feet 7 3/8 inches. And after looking at this, what we kind of found out is that there's not going to be a whole lot of space up here because we only have about 11 feet to work with on top of our trailer. So if we're designing a tiny house that's going to be on wheels, we have to account for the height from the ground to for the trailer height, and we can only be at 13 foot 6 inches for our total height. So we have somewhere in the vicinity of 11 feet to work with, so we really only end up with a few feet up here. So not a whole lot of space for a loft. So what we can do to maximize this, possibly, one thing we could consider is building our floor down below the top of our walls. And we kind of played around with some different numbers and came up with this 6 foot 8 inches and then the 6.25 inches, which gives us 7.25 inches for this height. So what I wanted to show you is on Revit how this is actually going to play out for our width of building. So whenever I switch over to Revit, the first thing I need to do is I need to establish my level heights. So the way that I do that is by going into one of my elevations. So in my elevation, it shows that level 1 is at 0. Level 2 is at 10 feet. This is the default in Revit. So what I can do is, first of all, I'm going to give this a different height. So I click on this 10 feet, and I'm going to try using that 6 foot 8 ceiling height, and I'm going to make this 7 feet 2 and 1/4 inches. So 7 feet 2.25 inches. And instead of calling it level 2, I'm going to call it loft, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. Now I also want to have the wall height on here. So our wall height for this is going to remain the same height. So whenever I look at my picture, my wall height is going to be 8 feet 1 1/8 inch. So what we can do is we can add, on the architecture tab, we can add another level. Bring this out here, drop it, and I'm going to just do a little offset here so that we can see it. It doesn't change the height of the level, it just changes where it's located, where the text is located. So our wall height again is going to be 8 feet 1.125 inches. And instead of calling this level 3, let's call it top of wall, so we know exactly what we're looking at. Okay, you can see that the walls don't actually go to the top of the wall. So if I click on this wall, or this wall, it tells me over here in my properties panel that the top constraint, or basically where the top of the wall goes to, is up to level loft. So instead of it going to level loft, we're going to take it up to level top of wall. And I can do that with all of the walls. Just to show you in 3D, right now we only have one wall that goes up to the top of wall there. And I'm just going to hover over top of a wall and hit tab. It's going to select them all, and I'm going to change the top constraint to top of wall. Alright, now I could go through and I could add a floor. So my floor is right here, and whenever I do this, the first one that comes up is a generic 12-inch floor. We don't have that big of a span, so we don't have to have that thick of a floor. So we're going to bump this down to, we're going to edit the type. Actually, we're going to look to see if we can find something that's more realistic with what we're using. So we'll start out with this wood joist 10-inch wood finish. I'm going to edit type, I'm going to duplicate, and I'm going to call this loft floor. And then I'm going to edit the structure. I'm going to take out the finished floor, the 3/4 inch oak, and I'm going to leave the 3/4 inch plywood, but for the structure, which is structure wood, I'm going to change this to 5.5 inches thick. Say OK, OK, and now I can come in and I can draw the floor. So the default is for picking the walls to establish my boundary. I'm going to pick that wall, that wall, that wall, and that wall. If I wanted to, I could have the floor go outside of the walls also, but in this case I'm going to go ahead and leave it on the inside, since we're building the floor on the inside of the walls. I go ahead and hit the big green check mark, say OK, and now I have a floor. So at this point it's kind of hard to tell that I have that floor. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cut a section so I can see an inside view of this. So I come up here to the section button, and I'm just going to do it the other direction. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to cut a section across there. And then I'm going to change the viewing part of the section. So I can double click on the section and it shows me what I have. I can see right away that I'd have to change the floor for my the first floor, but this is looking okay. So I can change this again, or I could just simply change my scale to a bigger scale, and it's going to make the text look smaller. So without a roof, I can't really see what's going on here too well. And I guess what I'm seeing is this floor was put on level 1. So I can real easily click on that floor, and I can change that to loft. Now the floor is where it's supposed to be. And the next thing that I would have to do is actually add a roof. So I'm going to go back out to, and I want to add the roof on the top of wall view. So I'm going to go to my project browser, and on top of wall, I'm going to click on that. I'm going to zoom in, and all I'm seeing right now is my floor. So when this happens, there's a couple different things that we could try to change to make this look right. One thing is the view range in the view properties. Click on that, and I could try messing around with these values. So basically, I want to look a little bit past the top of the wall for my floor plan. So my view depth, I'm going to make that -1 foot. And the bottom, I'm going to make that -1 foot. I'm going to say apply, and that all of a sudden, and this is basically where it's going to be cut through and how far I'm going to see the walls. I can say okay now that my walls are actually showing up. Alright, to do the roof, we can click on roof, and I'm going to choose a roof to start with that's similar to what we're going to use. So we're going to start out with a wood rafter 8-inch asphalt shingle insulated. I'm going to edit the type, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm just going to call this tiny house roof. So it has a unique name. I'm going to edit the structure, and the only thing I'm going to change here is instead of using 2x8s, I'm going to use 2x4s for my roof. I'm going to change this to 3.5 inches instead of 7.5. Whenever I do that, now I have a roof that's... Okay, so we can edit the structure. After we edit the structure, we see that the roof's 4 3/8 inch thick. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to pick the walls for the roof. And this time, I do want the walls to be on the outside, so I'm going to hit this little blue arrow. And I also want an overhang. So I'm going to do an overhang of at least 3 inches. On a house, I typically do a foot. Since we're doing a tiny house, we're going to do 3 inches. And to do that, I have to select each one of these and change it to 3 inches. After I'm done with that, I'm going to change my slope. So I'm going to get rid of the slope on both those ends by clicking on them and then unchecking the box that says define slope. And then on these two side ones, I'm going to click on those both, highlight them, and I'm going to change the slope on this to a 312. Now, right now we have asphalt shingles. This would be a little bit too shallow, not steep enough of a slope. So we might end up using metal roofing and use the 312. So I can say apply and hit the green check mark, and I can click on the roof and make sure I put it on the right layer or on the right level. Top of wall looks good. And now whenever I look at my section, I see what I have. And you can start to see that with that real shallow roof, I don't have much space up there at all. So what I could do is I could measure from the top to the bottom. Right now I'm only at 9'7", and we decided we have somewhere around 11 feet. So what I can do is I can click on this roof and I can change the roof pitch. So maybe the roof pitch becomes a 612. which just made it steeper. And now I have more room up there. Again, I can measure it, and I see that I have 10 feet 6 now. So maybe I leave that at 10 foot 6, and I can measure on the inside, and I can see how much space I actually have. I have 2 feet 11 almost. So the other thing that I can do, just to show you how you can change how much room you have up here, is we're going to go out to our level 1. Instead of this being 8 feet wide, if I make this 10 feet wide, and I click on this section, now all of a sudden I have even more room up here. And if I measure this, now I'm at 3 foot 5 inches almost for my loft area. If I go back to level 1 and I make this 11 feet, click on this and I measure it again, now I have 3 feet 8 inches. And with that, I'm also getting this overall height changing also. So 11 foot 4, I'm getting close to the maximum height that I could have. So it's really starting to look like the most room I'm going to have up here is about 3 feet 8 inches. Just to show you real quickly what I was doing, if I move the wall in, the roof gets smaller, the space gets smaller. If I move it out, it gets bigger and bigger. If I change the roof pitch, let's say I make this a 9/12 instead of a 6/12, it just got steeper, giving me more room in the middle. I could also do something like this, where I make a low sloped roof, but instead of this top of wall being 8 feet 1 1/8, maybe this becomes 10 feet 4.5 inches. And now I have more usable space in here, and I still am getting close. I'm at 11 feet 11, so I'm probably going to have to drop this down to something like 10 feet even, or even 9 foot 10. So you can play around with a lot of different variables to get exactly what you want for this loft area.